Hello, everyone. Welcome to a bonus episode of the Slash Filmcast. No full-length episode today after our huge, massive top 10 episode last week. But I'm here with Devendra Hardawar and Jeff Kanata, and we're just going to talk about a couple of Netflix things that have come out recently. Some Netflix things that are taking the world by storm. Specifically, we're going to talk about Black Mirror, Bandersnatch, as well as the new Sandra Bullock film Bird Box. Before we get into any of that, I want to mention you can find more episodes of the Slash Filmcast at slashfilmcast.com. Email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. And I also want to mention I am an employee of Amazon Prime Video before we get started, although my views only represent myself and not those of my company. So I just want to call that out before we start. But all that said, let's dive into Black Mirror Bandersnatch. So this is a movie that I was very intrigued by. A Netflix interactive film. We have been big fans of Black Mirror. We've devoted whole episodes to Black Mirror, seasons, right? Just talking about all the different entries into the anthology. And I think we're all at least intrigued by this, right? So, Jeff Kanata, I'm going to start with you because you host a video game podcast, I've heard, called DLC.
Indeed, I do.
And so this movie seems like it's going to be right up your alley in terms of combining two of your great loves, movies and video games, right? It's an interactive movie, right?
Interactive storytelling. It is indeed. And more than that, I wonder, I'm a little bit older than you guys, and I wonder how much of your childhood you were reading Choose Your Own Adventure books, because I don't know if those persisted very long, but they were a big part of my years growing up. Were you guys in it? Did you read those books?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Huge part of my upbringing. And also, not only that, this is not the first interactive movie I have experienced. There was a movie called Mr. Payback that came out in like 1990s. And it was an interactive movie that was written and partially written and directed by Bob Gale, who was a co-writer for Back to the Future.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie, Mr. Payback, starred Christopher Lloyd, and every seat in the theater was outfitted with a controller that had 3 buttons on it.
Wow!
And at various points in the movie, it would be like, Mr. Payback is a cyborg who like messes people up who are bad, and it's like, do you want to like use the cattle prod? Do you want to use the knife? Like you get to choose like the thing that you want. And the movie was 20 minutes long, and it cost full price to go see it. And I went to see it, and I was so impressed. Like the movie, I was so impressed that I went back and saw it again right after. Like saw it twice in a row, even though it cost full price, and the movie was 20 minutes long. And then later, when you watch like clips from it on YouTube and stuff, you realize that the movie is actually very horrible. So, I'm just saying that, like, I'm a huge interactive story, and Sega CD, right? Like, Phantasmagoria,
like Night Trap.
Night Trap. I'm an FMV full motion video on CD-ROM zombie from way back, and so I was very much in that culture when I was growing up, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I think more than trying to be a video game. I mean, it's a movie about video games, about video game design, but I think it is really more attempting to capture what it was like to read those books. And I say that because the structure, how much spoilering are we doing right now?
Let's just say we're going to spoil the whole thing. So, like,
okay.
It's pretty hard to talk about it without spoiling it. So,
yeah.
We're going to spoil Black Mirror Bandersnatch starting right now.
Yeah. There's some spoiler moments, so you probably want to experience it. I would say if you want to experience it, you can be spoiled. Although I have no idea what you guys saw versus what I saw, so it's an interesting thing. So structurally, I think the movie is much more concerned with delivering the experience of reading those Choose Your Own Adventure books. And I say that because the experience I had, and I think most kids had reading the Choose Your Own Adventure books, was it would say, if you want to do this, turn to page 27. If you want to do this, turn to page 42. And you would hold your finger where you were, and you would look on both pages, and you would find out if you died on one or not. And then you would go back and you'd go to the other one, because it wasn't like a video game, at least a lot of video games these days, which are attempting to create narrative. I'm thinking mostly of David Cage's work, games like Heavy Rain and Detroit Become Human and Beyond Two Souls, which are these very complex systems in which you can make granular choices, big, broad choices, and all of them deliver fracturing narratives that give you different experiences. But very few of them are about getting to dead ends, right? Mm-hmm. Choose Your Own Adventure books, when in the 80s, when I was a kid, was about delivering a bunch of dead ends that were pretty unsatisfying, and then one or more endings that were actually sort of a journey through the book. And Bandersnatch is much more like that. It is not nearly as, I think, narratively sound as David Cage's work, which is allowing you to have a fully fleshed out story no matter what you do. Right. But that story conforms to the choices that you make. And even his earlier work, I mean, Detroit Become Human, you see all the permutations in a graph at the end of each level. But his earlier work, Heavy Rain, was meant to exist in a way where you weren't even aware that you were making these big choices. You weren't even aware that there were paths not taken. It was just your story. And there was no way for you to go back and change anything. It would save the game after every moment of decision. And there weren't big decisions. Like, it wasn't like take the fork in the road left or right or choose to do this or not. You would just play the game, and the game would tell you a story that was influenced by the things you decided, but you were just experiencing your story. And then later on you would talk to somebody and you'd be like, oh man, it was crazy when that person died. And they're like, that person didn't die for me. So it was a much more, I think, complex, subtle and sound, sort of a density in storytelling that Bandersnatch isn't really interested in. And those Choose Your Own Adventure books weren't really interested in. And I think that is unfortunate for this movie, because this becomes about it becomes more like when you go to, a sort of a cheesy diner and they have the maze on the table and you start tracing your finger and then you get to a dead end and you're like, oh, well, that's not the way. And then you trace your finger back and you keep going and you're just trying to find a way through rather than actually making decisions that you want to make and then seeing how that plays out. Because I started, quote unquote, playing this movie. I started interacting with this movie the way I do video games, where I make decisions that I want to make, that I want the characters to go through. And very quickly it became clear that the show wasn't interested in me doing that. Mm-hmm. It would force me into certain ways, or it would quickly tell me that was wrong and make me start over or go back a little ways. So if you talk about it from a sort of game theory perspective or a game industry perspective, it's very simplistic and kind of unsatisfying. But if you talk about it from a filmic perspective, it's incredibly ambitious and kind of staggering, the amount of things that they shot and the amount of ways that things can go and the wide variety of viewing experiences that you can have. I'm sort of impressed by that, and I think it's a cool exercise. I admire the chutzpah that it took to do this, And there are, since we're in total spoiler town, there are a couple of moments where I was like, I want to give you a high five, Charlie. I want to give you a high five. The moment, the Netflix moment, mm-hmm. is wonderful. It feels like magic. It feels like magic. And there are a couple of others where I was like, this is really cool. But fundamentally to me, I don't think the story is particularly interesting, and I don't think the characters are particularly interesting. I was never drawn into the plight. I guess we're supposed to want his video game to do well, but
yeah.
I never really was invested in that. And it was a more of a curiosity of like, whoa, what can we do and where can we go and what weird stuff can happen? But the story doesn't ever really hold together. I got to an ending. I watched until I got to an ending. And then I stopped. I wasn't compelled to go back and see other endings.
Oh, Jeff, did you at least see that it was trying to throw you back into certain points or certain spots, or did you stop immediately?
No. The ending I got to was the credits.
Oh, nice.
I did a bunch of going backs, but I watched until I got to the credits.
I see.
Okay.
I see.
Yeah.
Because some endings don't give you the credits. So
I don't.
Right.
Yeah. I guess you consider those endings, but anytime
and you can still keep going after the credits too. Yeah.
I looked at those more of like little dead ends. But yes, you could definitely go after the credits. But there are endings that are like the show's over. There are endings where you see two televisions and it's like, do you want to go back because you didn't do the right thing or you?
Yeah.
And I don't consider those. Those are like the choose your adventure. Like you fell off the cliff and you're dead. But then I got to like I saved my mom and got credits. Like I feel like that was an ending, right? Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I'm done. But ultimately, like, you get all this information that seems not to bear out in different versions, and I just didn't think it was particularly satisfying. And mostly that comes down to me not being super invested in the characters themselves, our main character and his plight. I was just more impressed by it and amused by the cleverness of it, rather than actually enjoying the story. I mean, with David Cage games, I am impressed by the wizardry of letting me have big impact on the storyline and making big decisions, especially in Detroit Become Human, for example.
I will say, Jeff, this is the most I've ever heard praise for David Cage games. So keep going.
I know a lot of people don't like them. I like them. I do.
I really like Heavy Rain, but everything I haven't even tried Detroit because everything I've read about it hasn't been good. And what was the last one? Was it Beyond?
No.
I wanted to throw that game out the window.
Detroit Become Human was the most recent one.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Before that was Beyond Two Souls.
Yeah.
And I hated that game. So yeah. It's interesting.
I know a lot of people have very negative feelings about it. I've finished all those games. I loved. Not loved. I've very much enjoyed my experience with those games. And while heavy-handed and awkward sometimes they can be, I do think that they succeed in delivering an actual story I'm interested in seeing the outcome of. And this I didn't. I was just much more interested in the gimmick of it. And it's a cool gimmick. It is a cool gimmick. It's a neat gimmick, and it takes advantage of the platform it's on in a really fun way. But ultimately, I just didn't think it was all that good.
All right,
I think this really comes down to, it comes down to, I think broadly, games are better at being cinematic than cinema is better at being a game.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. Exactly right.
And I think that's what it really comes down to. First of all, for Netflix people, I can't imagine how many people, you play this a couple times, sure, but you don't watch Netflix to do this work or even this mental work of making choices. You kind of just want to veg and sit and watch something. So I think that it's fundamentally incompatible with the platform it's on. I had a fun experience with it. I played about like 2 to 2.5 hours. I saw some really cool stuff. But at the end of the day, I didn't really care about the story. The characters weren't super interesting. It wasn't like it was a memorable Black Mirror ride, but it wasn't like a memorable story in any way. The only character I really liked was Colin Rittman, played by Will Poulter, he's sort of like the cool Uber hacker who also has a sense that, something weird is going on. Like he has a weird sense that free will doesn't exist in that world. And I found that kind of interesting. I don't think they did that much with that character. But it was a fun ride. I sat through it with my wife. We did it for 2 hours and that was it, and we didn't think much about it beyond that. A big problem too, is that you need some sort of like interface to see like, okay, you did this and this and this. Can you go back to this point and try something else? Because restarting this thing from the beginning and just like going, to a specific point just is a big waste of time. So it's interesting, but that's it.
I think you put it really well that, video games have surpassed movies in terms of...
Look at Red Dead Redemption 2.
Red Dead Redemption 2, great example. Here's the thing that video games have largely figured out, is that you can at most do 3 to 4 endings that are satisfying, right, for any given story. And that any video game that has more than that, in general, at least some of those endings are going to suck. And it's really difficult to do one good ending, right, for any movie or video game. Jeff, does that strike you as mostly accurate what I'm saying, or do you?
Yeah,
feel
I
like,
think that may be oversimplifying it, but I think yeah, that's fair thing to say.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at a game like Red Dead Redemption, where there's like 3 to 4 definitive endings, and the choices you make dictate which ending you're going to get, but there's no point at which you're just going to run the car off the road and the game ends all of a sudden. That's just a terrible experience, and there's many terrible experiences in Black Mirror Bandersnatch where a choice comes up. You have no frame of reference for like what you're supposed like.
Sure.
As you mentioned, like, do you even want this character to succeed at the video game? You don't even know, and then you're presented with a choice where it's not clear if one choice or the other will bring him to the proper conclusion, right?
But that's how those choose your own adventure books were
it's true.
too.
It's true. Yeah, you could dead end in a choose your own adventure. Yeah.
More than that too, they would also say, do you want to be nice to the guy or be mean to him? He'd be like, you're being nice. Okay, you're nice. He stabs you in the heart, and it would like set you up for what you think is the safe choice to be the dead end. And I think Bandersnatch does some of that as well, where it's like the thing that there's a few, especially in the first run through, the first few scenes, there are a few things where it's like no one's not going to pick that. It's like really trying to get you to do this thing, and that thing is a swerve. So I think it's kind of playing that way too.
Yeah, for sure. There's many choices you can make that like dead end you and screw you over, and
at least it reboots you real quick. Like
it reboots you real quick. And let's just also say the technology is pretty interesting. Like usually Netflix will like I read a Variety story about this where it says like Netflix will cache the next section you're going to watch. But because it's a choose your own adventure, like it needs to cache 2 things so that there's no lag when you make a choice.
Which apparently this whole thing is bullshit too, because the Apple TV 4K, one of the most powerful streaming boxes in the world, cannot run this experience. So when you try to run it, you get a little like apology video saying, "I'm sorry, your device just doesn't work on this. Please use your like phone or your 3-year-old TV app, which can support this." It is pretty ridiculous. I think it comes down to like Apple not supporting the open source technology required to do this. But this sort of like bifurcating or like separation of content across devices is a nightmare. I've heard people who had to go through like 4 or 5 different devices before they were able to watch this thing properly.
Yeah, you can't watch it on Apple TV or Chromecast apparently, which is kind of insane. But I found Bandersnatch to be enormously frustrating and unsatisfying. And Jeff, you're saying, it's just like the Choose Your Own Adventure books. Yeah, there's a reason those books never won awards, Jeff. You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason they're not regarded as like great literature. They sold over 250 million copies, but they're not winning like Tor awards. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not like.
No, I agree,
and it's because
they were disposable.
Because there's an inherent limit to how good a book can be if you have like 18 endings, right? And I consider like any time the game dead end or the Bandersnatch dead ends as an ending, right? It's an extremely unsatisfying, not fun ending, but it's still an ending to the story. And there's dozens of them, and it's a terrible experience in my opinion. Now, one of the interesting aspects of there's a lot of people that might say, well, that's the point. That's the point, Dave. It's supposed to be frustrating, right? It's supposed to the movie is about the illusion of free will, right? You think you have these choices, but really the filmmaker is dictating what the choices. The character, Fionn Whitehead's character, thinks he can choose, but really it's you, the viewer, that's dictating choose. You, in your real life, viewer, you think you have free will, but really there's all these other forces at play that are driving you to go in one direction or the other. Yes, okay, fine. That's one of the many themes of this show. But that doesn't mean that that's something I need to enjoy.
It's not super interesting.
Just because you're like, oh, hey, I'm going to make this viewing experience super frustrating so that you understand how frustrating your own lives are constrained in such a manner. And it's like, well, that sounds like a terrible thing for me to experience, and I don't want to go through it. That doesn't mean like just because it's good at illustrating the point. It's like, hey, I'm going to smash your toes with a hammer so that you may experience what true pain is like. And it's like, well, okay, like that's probably going to illustrate that, but that doesn't mean I'm going to enjoy it. That's kind of how I feel about Bandersnatch. Now, there are some cool endings, right? We can talk about some of the cool endings. So at one point, one of the endings, right, is that the game never comes out because Fionn Whitehead's character needs to murder his dad. But then like someone's daughter, like Colin's daughter or someone picks it up, and then like they end up making the game that you are playing, right? Like that was kind of a nice Black Mirror style ending. Were there any other endings that you guys enjoyed?
See, was it after you choose Netflix? Is that when you get the big action sequence?
Yeah,
like,
there's one point at which
fun.
you get the big action sequence, and then like
That's
it's
so much
revealed that he's on a movie set. Did you get that ending?
Yeah,
that
I
was
didn't
pretty
get
cool.
that. Not the movie set.
where it's not a movie set. It's more like this. They staged the whole thing to trick him into that sequence to me was the most fun when I was like laughing out loud and smiling when Netflix and then explain to him more what it is. He's like, "What are you talking about?"
Right.
And then and then that leads to what did you guys just say? The action sequence where it's like he's like, you have the option of do you want it to be more actiony? Yeah, or fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, and it just goes way over the top and crazy with the fuck yeah. Yeah, that was fun.
But when he there's an option you can like choose to jump out the window, right?
Yeah.
If you choose that, then it's revealed that it's like a movie set, right, or a set. But then like Fionn Whitehead's character, like he's playing his character in Black Mirror, but in reality, like in his brain, he's still like the real character. You know what I'm saying?
Oh wow!
So that was pretty.
That
that was a pretty interesting ending. I
got the one where I got all the way to the credits on the one where you go back in time through the mirror and you save your mom from dying.
I was trying to get that.
Yeah, and you go off with her, but it means that you both die, and then it cuts to him sitting alone in the chair, or sitting in the chair in the psychiatrist's office, and he goes comatose. So you go with her. I guess you just die together.
That's a pretty messed up ending. Like you'd rather like die with your mom than live with your dad. Basically, is what that is.
Dad is kind of a dick, I guess. So.
But then there was a whole thing about the dad being part of this organization, and he's not really their dad.
And he's like mind controlling everything, right? That was
and it was all faked. Yeah. His entire childhood was a planted memory that wasn't fake. It was
fun.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the audacity of it and the sheer amount of stuff that is in there, and like there's a hidden website that has the actual games that you can play on a real emulator. It's all of the sort of busy work of it is, I think, very impressive and cool. I just didn't care,
Yeah, and I wish that, like, even in Red Dead Redemption 2, like, I hate to be a broken record, but like, games really are better at this now than this movie was. Certainly, I mean, even Red Dead Redemption 2, like, you're choosing between being a good guy or a bad guy. Like, you have the choice. The choices you make throughout the game inform which ending you're going to get. And that's really compelling. Whereas, like, in here, you basically don't even have the choice, because you don't even know which option is going to bring you to the outcome that you want, right? Like, okay, work with the team of people at the office or do it on your own. First of all, one of those leads you to a dead end, which is super dumb. But then it's like you don't even know which one of those is preferable. Like,
it may be kind of unfair to compare those two directly, I guess, because it is not trying to be the same thing, but most directly it is like the choose your own adventure book. It is sort of like you have two paths. What do you do? Who knows? If you had a book that was like an e-reader and you couldn't like hold the pages right and you just had to make a leap, that's pretty much it. But yeah, the thing about Red Dead, which I just finished, or at least the main part of it, you live as that character in a way too. Like you're
Right.
role playing as Arthur Morgan. So a lot of those choices are just like things you're naturally making and not like these binary things. Although there are points in that game where like, yeah, you could choose to kill somebody or let them go or make them pay or whatever. Um, yeah,
I just don't think this was making any overall point.
No,
because every thread was so disjointed and so unconnected with a parallel thread that it didn't add up to anything. It was just like, oh, in this crazy universe, it's this, or in this crazy choice, it's this. And I felt like it was on the way to something with the whole, like, you're just a person watching. I'm being controlled by this person that's watching me. That's an interesting idea of like, oh, we're doing a meta commentary on entertainment and stuff. But even that goes nowhere. And it ultimately isn't even about that. It's just a fun speed bump on the way. So it just didn't add up to anything, really.
I think it's a fun experiment, at least like with the last season of Black Mirror. I felt like some stories were just kind of a stretch where things were getting kind of samey. I'm thinking of like the insurance adjuster one, which had a great premise and then ended up just feeling like a bad noir movie. So at least this is something fresh. It's a little different. Nice to see Charlie Brooker like trying some new ideas out there.
And I just love that Black Mirror is the only thing like this. You know,
well, there's Minecraft. There's a Minecraft story mode game, which is the same exact thing, by the way. It's the same interactive tech. It launched a couple weeks ago. I think that's like the remnants of the Telltale stuff. I'm not quite sure how that's all connected, but it's the same thing, same tech.
Well, but what I mean is it's the only show that is playing like this and surprising its audience. And you know, like every episode of Black Mirror, it just seems like an event because it's so creative and outside the box and anything is possible. And now we're doing this with it. You know, I just love that this series exists.
Yep. Agreed.
I'm still looking, despite how negative my experience was with Bandersnatch, I'm still looking forward to Black Mirror season 5.
For sure.
Which is apparently coming around late 2019 is what I hear, right?
Okay.
So it does seem like a Christmas.
That this was season 5, so then it got confusing. Yeah.
No, like this is like delayed season 5, which is coming in 2019. So yeah,
it's like shooting like several movies, basically, like a prolonged.
It was like
shoot.
5 hours of content, is my understanding for Bandersnatch. So
yeah, I will also say the content looks good. Like I love the way the footage is done. It's David Slade doing it. Really a big fan of him. He gets some of that, like his footage always has like a metallic sheen to it in a way. So it reminded me of Hannibal at times, which he did a lot of.
It was kind of funny that like whenever there's a choice, like this kind of dark cloud descended upon his face. I thought that was kind of an interesting visual to denote like, oh, the critical moment happening in this guy's life right now.
Did you guys get to the moment where you have to put in like a 5-digit number?
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought that was the coolest, most video gamey part, you know, where it's like I actually have to have paid attention at some point.
Well, it's also they're repeating it to you.
Yeah, they repeat it to you like over and over again.
Yeah.
I know, but you have to pay attention to that.
As you're inputting. Yeah.
All right, well, those are our thoughts on Bandersnatch. Still psyched about Black Mirror Season 5, but let's talk about Bird Box. So... what did you guys think? Devindra, this is a movie you want to talk about. This is a movie that, according to Netflix, 45 million people have watched at least 70% of, which is really impressive.
Okay.
But what'd you think of this movie with Sandra Bullock about a thing that will get you if you look at it?
We are really scraping the bottom of the barrel for post-apocalyptic ideals right now. I'm a fan of movies like this, and the fact that it was written by Eric Heiserer, but I think from what I read, there was maybe some other writing thing, like other people maybe contributed to the script, made me want to pay attention to this because he did Arrival, and I thought that ended up being a great film. Also, this movie is directed by Susan Bier, who's the last person I expect to do something like this. She did The Night Manager, that show on AMC, but also she did After the Wedding with Mads Mikkelsen, which is a great little film. This is a really weird post-apocalyptic movie. Like, it just feels very strange coming after A Quiet Place when you had creatures that you couldn't make sounds. Now you can't see them. I think there are some great sequences here, especially like the first discovery sequence where just everything goes to shit and people start to realize like what's happening. And there's some great sequences throughout in terms of like set pieces. But man, is this a messy movie where like so much of it doesn't make sense. And by the end, it's just like, I was watching it to see like if it would get any better, but it was also like enjoyable in how bad it was at times.
Jeff Kanata, overall thoughts on Bird Box?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say my thoughts are best summed up in the form of a limerick.
Nice.
Another post-apocalyptic case, this time with a blindfold on your face. It's got tension galore, but I liked it more when it was called A Quiet Place.
All right.
Yeah, Quiet Place is the movie to watch. If you want to watch the this kind of movie, just go watch
There is
that.
no Sandra Bullock in A Quiet Place, so
True, and she's great.
there's a good cast in this movie.
Which isn't to say this movie doesn't have some merit. There are moments that are really tension-filled, very intense. I happen to enjoy the fact that it is a post-apocalyptic movie, but also a currently apocalyptic movie. It is a during the apocalypse for a lot of the movie, and that stuff to me is the most fun. The like figuring it out, dealing with it, what's going to happen. And there is a harrowing sequence that involves birthing babies. That is, I mean, that is just it gets you hard. It is a terrifying moment, and the underlying idea, the underlying boogeyman here, which the movie goes way out of its way to give an explanation to it, the most belabored way, by literally having a character who just happens to be writing a book about it. But like this idea of if good people look at this thing, they want to kill themselves, and if bad people look at this thing, they love it. That's fucking scary as hell.
It's a good concept, yeah.
Really good concept.
Mm-hmm.
I
also have to say I love there's a small genre of movies or a small like niche of movies of blindfolded people doing cool things, and this movie is right there. I'm thinking, yeah. I'm thinking of Intacto, the Spanish film that was about like the power of luck. Which is that movie has a great virtuoso sequence where it's just like people blindfolded running through a forest, full speed, and that's an image.
Eli?
Yeah, Book of Eli. Well, as long as we recognize they were blind, right? Also thinking of what was it? There's a Bruce Lee movie where he has to blindfold himself. Is that Enter the Dragon? But like there's a blind fighting sequence, and also like that Animatrix sequence too, the blind fight.
Fist of Legend too.
There you go, Fist of Legend. That's what I'm thinking.
Jet Li movie,
Jet Li
right?
one.
Fist of Legend. Is that? Yeah, I think that's the one.
It is Fist of Legend. Yeah, that's a great fight, and just like blindfold, because it shows like I don't even have to see to be as cool as I am, and this movie kind of does that. There's some great sequences that happen while people are blindfolded.
Yes, but
I think you guys are. I think that is almost literally insane what you were just saying just now. I mean, you're right that those are great sequences that you just alluded to. But the problem with this movie is that it just inherently looks goofy to have people covering their eyes in any scenario. Like
I would say it looks cool.
It just is. It's like they're playing peekaboo. Like, oh, someone's got to open the door. You got to cover your eyes now. Like it just is like they're playing peekaboo.
You see the literal cost of what it means to even open your eyes a bit. You know, I think it does kind of justify itself, but I don't know. Like the blindfoldedness also comes into like the heavy themes that this movie's trying to portray of like motherhood and how you need to open yourself up to it. In a way, so she's blind to love and motherhood, basically.
I fully expected this movie to reveal that it was all some sort of fever dream as she was giving birth. That was like her accepting being a mother. It didn't go there, but I was like, that's totally what this is. All this crazy journey for her to accept being a mother, and now she can be a mother.
No, the ending is just very dumb. How about that?
The ending is super dumb. The most egregious. And we're in spoilers, right?
Yeah, let's just say we're going to be spoiling Bird Box, but yeah.
We already have, really. But there are moments that are really good. There are moments that are really good. There are a lot that aren't. There's this fundamental moment where she has her sort of naturally birthed son and someone else's daughter in the boat, and she's got to decide who's going to look to get through the rapids.
And she's like, "No, we're all dying.
We're all dying." I mean, so that choice, that sort of Sophie's choice of which child to die, it got me. It was a very powerful moment. But her solution is so unimaginative and bad, and literally, like, there is no universe in which 2 5-year-olds getting dumped into the rapids both survive. There's no universe in where that happens, and then neither of them open their eyes. It's like, like you have to. You write yourself into that problem. You got to write yourself out of it in a more believable way than just, well, we toppled over and they happen to be okay. I mean, that's literally the solution, is that, it went terrible, but
at least tie yourselves together or something.
Yeah, figure something out. Come up with a smart solution. She's smart throughout the whole movie. Be smart. But that my biggest problem with the whole movie is that, like, we get dumped into the water, and then the end. The after they're out of the water and they're in the forest, like, they just wait it out. They just, like, she just doesn't respond.
They're just chilling.
Yeah, it's a whole thing is, and all of these post-apocalyptic movies, the end is like, well, we found other people. It's like, yeah, but everyone is still really fucked. Everyone is still so fucked. But I did like. I mean, there's a lot to like about them. It just to me is too similar to A Quiet Place and too inferior to A Quiet Place for me to recommend it.
I'm just surprised it became such a quick hit. I think, in a way, I blame social media for a lot of that. Like, people just started talking about it, and Sandra Bullock has a very powerful fan base, so people will just mobilize when they see her in a new thing on Netflix. So that's the power of that.
It's good.
Closing thoughts, Devendra Hardawar?
It's there are a lot of bad sci-fi movies on Netflix, and I don't regret watching this one. It is a fun bad movie to watch, and there is that sequence with Sarah Paulson while she's driving. I think it's worth it to see that whole bit.
Oh, I want to say one other quick thing that's totally a spoiler, but drives me crazy. The whole movie is called Bird Box, right? Because they want to keep birds around because the birds are like the early warning system. But why didn't the birds warn about the dude that wants to murder everybody while they're having babies?
He's not he's not one of the things. It's just warning things.
But it freaked out. It freaked out in the grocery store when the dude wasn't one of the things. It freaked out. Remember that whole part? She's like, "There's something wrong." The guy on the other side of the door.
Maybe one of those things was in there. I don't know. Don't ask me.
The whole movie is a early warning system, and
I love the line when the guy through that fridge comes out, and the dude's like, "Oh, that's so and so. He was in jail, but he was always a good guy."
Yeah. Yeah, I don't get it. Like the dude puts the birds in the fridge.
Yeah.
For no reason, because the birds were cool with them for days, right?
All right.
So
nobody's got an explanation for that? Okay.
I don't think the movie has an explanation for that, Jeff.
It's called Bird Box. The whole movie's called Bird Box.
All right, guys. That's going to be it for this bonus episode of the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week for our 500th episode, during which we have just some special reflections planned. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for listening. See you later.